Welcome, folks. My name is Phil Jochimson. For this session, we have SharePoint and MS Teams Collaborative Technologies presented by Margaret Murphy. Margaret is a grad student at the iSchool and has a background in instructional design and learner services. Quick housekeeping thing. For this presentation, there are going to be some questions that you can respond to in the chat during the presentation, but there's going to be a dedicated time at the end where you can unmute if you want to ask a question. So dedicated Q&A time at the end. And Margaret, I'll hand it off to you and not my cat.
Is that your cat? Okay. I hope my dog doesn't hear it. So, hey, everybody, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I didn't know what kind of a turnout I would get for a Friday afternoon when the weather is so beautiful. So I'm so happy you're all here. Today's program is SharePoint and MS Teams, and I'm really passionate about this topic. So I hope I get through everything. Might have to stop early, but it gives us at least a pretty good idea of what we can do with these applications. So let's get started. I do want to mention that this lesson is intended for learners of all levels and abilities. So no matter what your level of skill or understanding is with SharePoint, as long as you have an interest in organizing instructional resources or information online, I think you will find some benefit from today's program. So let's do a warm-up activity. In the chat window, please enter a word that describes your knowledge and experience with SharePoint and or MS Teams. So maybe 2 words, 1 or 2 words. Tell me a little bit about your knowledge and experience. Maybe you're an expert, maybe you're a novice, intermediate. Okay, intermediate. Oh, great, great. SharePoint wizard. Hey, who was that? Now it's going too fast. I need to talk to you. I'm sure I have questions. Expert. Great, great. Okay, great. Well, this is occasional user. Okay, intermediate, limited. Okay, good. So we have people from all different levels of ability and interest and experience using SharePoint for many years. Terrific. I may call on you if I get stuck with questions. Super. Hey, thanks for participating in that activity. It's just a good way for us to get warmed up and really thinking about SharePoint and MS Teams, and glad to see folks have some experience with that. I do want to tell you that this presentation will follow a dynamic instructional model to meet diverse needs of all learners. So I want to cover that. There are a few key components. First of all, it's what I call a tell me. And I should tell you, I'm an instructional designer, so I just have to have this kind of structure. It's just good for me. So we'll start with the tell me, and we'll talk about just what is SharePoint, and then we'll talk about with him. And that's what's in it for me. You know, why is this important for me and the work that I do? Then we'll do the show me. And this will be a dynamic where we'll go through the steps for creating a SharePoint and a document library. And then ask me. And the ask me will be a reflection activity where I will ask you, how will you connect with SharePoint? So that's a fun reflection activity. And then we'll do what I call let me try. And in this exercise, we'll go through some project management best practices for deploying your own SharePoint site. And finally, we'll do a summary with resources and, of course, a quick overview to talk about everything we covered today and then to answer any questions. Before we do get started, I would like to review our objectives. After completing this presentation, you will be able to identify the benefits of implementing a SharePoint and an MS Teams project. You will be able to recognize how a SharePoint document library organizes information, and you will reflect on project management best practices for implementing a collaborative project. So in our Tell Me section, what is SharePoint and MS Teams? Well, SharePoint is a web-based collaborative platform that integrates with MS Teams. You can use it as a secure place to store, organize, share, and access information from any device. and it can be accessed online at office.com. So let's do another activity. In the chat window, enter a key benefit of SharePoint and MS Teams that you find most valuable and why. What do you find most important for SharePoint in the work that you do? Web-based, collaborative? Perhaps you have a need to organize, share, or access information with your team. Which one of these is most important to you? I see sharing files as important. Yeah, it's either SharePoint or some other document control, document management system. Oh, James, thank you. That's very interesting. It does provides context to files. John, thank you. And organize and share files. Oh, Power Apps. I love that, Sherry. Yeah, very nice. Keeping track of information, keeping track of meetings. Great. I appreciate your participation in that quick activity. So now that you know what it is, and you have identified some of the value that it can bring to your organization, let's take a minute to discuss the challenge that inspired today's presentation. In this case study example today, we'll discuss how SharePoint provided an effective solution for the curation of online resources and support with collaboration and sharing during the continuity of instruction efforts across the UW-Madison campus when everyone went virtual in response to the pandemic. Prompted by this move to virtual learning, the ITG, the Instructional Technology Group at UW-Madison, put together a project work team to analyze and address the need for sharing instructional materials across the campus. I'm sure you all remember that when it happened. So using standard project management methods and strategies, this project work team evaluated the needs and determined that a SharePoint document library would be a good fit. Now, this was for several reasons. First, SharePoint was already an enterprise-wide application. It was available to everyone on campus. It's easy to use, and it's accessible on any device. It's completely integrated with a Microsoft Office suite. Navigation is intuitive with tools and functions like other Office applications, such as searching, sorting, filtering, when you're trying to find information. And even better, as you can see from the screenshot here, it can be accessed from within MS Teams. Now, for our project, this integration was really critical to our success because it simplified how users would access the document library. Later on in this presentation, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into both the components of the project work plan, as well as get a tour of the SharePoint platform. So now you may be asking yourself, what's in it for me? Why is this something valuable? Well, you may find this a useful application when you need to organize information or share documents with instructional staff or other team members. Or maybe you just need to save documents and information for your MS Teams channel. SharePoint and MS Teams are a collaboration platform with tools and functions that allow users the opportunity to share resources, including Word documents, Excel files, PDFs, images, videos, and links. Furthermore, the users of a SharePoint document library will benefit in many ways. Specifically, accessibility. There are multiple ways of interacting with the SharePoint, including search, sort, and filters. diverse formats. The SharePoint document library supports a variety of formats and document types, as we had just mentioned. Ease of use. The document library has a controlled vocabulary for the metadata fields and includes opportunity to put in descriptions to guide users who might be uploading information to the document library. Support. There are tutorials and support available on the Microsoft website. And documentation. In our case study, the project team created administrative and work plan documents, as well as quick user reference guides. Let's move on now. It's really getting exciting because now we get to go to the Show Me section, where we will do a quick demonstration of how to complete the steps for implementing a SharePoint document library. And you can try this at home right along with me if you'd like. But first of all, I'd like you to log into office.com with your campus net ID or other credential. Now, some of you probably do this every day. So here we are, we get to this office.com. And then we would click on the SharePoint icon in the left navigation pane. Now, if the icon is not there, if it's not displayed, then you would just click on the app launcher in the upper left-hand corner. And then within the app launcher pane, you would see SharePoint, and then you would just select it there. Now, when we make this selection, we can see that we will get to the next page where we can create a site by clicking on the Create Site with a little plus button there on the toolbar. And when we select Create Site, there are two options that display. We can create a team site or a communications site. And as you can see, both tiles include a description to help you decide what's going to be a best fit for your needs. For today's demonstration, I will select the team site. And next, we'll give the site a meaningful name. And then we'll scroll down and we'll click Next. Now here you're prompted to add members. However, keep in mind, you can add members at any time. So here we will select Finish. Now you can see my team site. Within this site that we just created, we'll create the document library by selecting the new option on the toolbar. And from here, we'll select Document Library. We'll enter a name and a description, and we will select the checkbox to include this library in the navigation pane on the left. And then we'll click Create. Great. Now the new document library displays within our SharePoint site that we just created. Now let's take a look at how a SharePoint document library organizes information. In our case study example, the continuity of instruction library organizes information with metadata in several columns, such as name, subject, audience, source, purpose, tools, and created by. This organizational model provides options for sorting and filtering when searching for information. And keep in mind, in your document library, you can customize these fields however you would like. I've often seen folks put in a document retention field to set a date for document review if you're in a controlled environment. I've seen other fields that would prompt owners for reviewing their information on a regular interval, kind of along the lines of the document review and retention, but you can add any field that you would like. So now that you have seen the demonstration in SharePoint, I think it may be prudent to consider how a project team can work together to create a document library for collaboration and sharing. So as we consider our case study, and that is the continuity of instruction SharePoint library effort, it's important to note that several project management best practices led to a successful implementation, the most important being a comprehensive project plan with a work breakdown structure. Now, that work breakdown structure included several things. We identified key stakeholders. We established project milestones, identified deliverables and dates, established a meeting schedule, and determined a communication strategy. These were key components of our project plan. We also had 5 project phases: needs analysis, design and development of the library, design and development of pages, site pages, and the views, design and development of any summary reporting that might be needed, and the implementation and evaluation phase. Let's take a little break from me talking and do another chat activity. In the chat window, please enter a few words that describe a project that you managed for your organization, maybe the name of the project or the goals, any project goals, or what was your role on the project. If you weren't the project manager, but just participated, how did you contribute? What did you bring? Were you a key stakeholder? What were the deliverables? Put some things in the chat there. Okay, great. Some pretty significant project managers here. Great. Oh, Peter, that sounds fascinating. Al, thank you. Yeah, web redesign. That's a lot of work. That's a big project as well. Super. Hey, thanks for participating in that chat. I know it's Friday after lunch, so I'm just trying to keep us engaged with activities. So now let's move on. And this is what I call the Ask Me section. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment to reflect on just a couple of things, considering everything we've covered and the experiences that you've highlighted in the chat. I'm curious and want you to reflect on this. How will you connect with SharePoint and MS Teams? Do you have a need to organize information or instructional resources? Can you think of a time when you might use SharePoint and MS Teams at your workplace? As you're working on those reflections, I would like you to, if you're comfortable, to share some of these in the chat. Share your reflection responses to the questions. How will you connect with SharePoint and Teams? Do you have a need to organize information? And how can you think of an upcoming project or a collaborative activity that you might have within your current work group or your team or your department? There's so much potential to use SharePoint in so many ways. What are some things that you might want to share in regard to this reflection? Thank you, Sherry. That's a great example. And I think that's why a lot of people are looking at SharePoint as the document management solution, is just for the ease of applying permissions to certain documents within folders. Great. Keeping track of meeting resources and notes. Bill, that's awesome because it's got MS Teams sitting on the top of that, right? So It's really a great place to be organized. Thanks for sharing that, and others may be reflecting, but let's move on. Oh, John, thank you. I just saw that. Yeah, SharePoint. Excellent. You're really going to like it as a replacement. So let's move on to the Let Me Try project best practices. So now that you've seen the potential application of SharePoint Document Library, you may be wondering to yourself how to organize a project to meet the needs of your organization. So as you think about potential applications of SharePoint, it can be overwhelming. So in this next activity, I'm going to ask you to consider some key components of a project plan and how these might align with your team or organization or project goals. So that's kind of fun. Let's take a look. In this checklist activity, I'm going to ask you to generate some ideas that will help you get started on implementing a SharePoint. Now, you won't have to share these in the chat. I just want you to kind of keep them in mind. You could jot them down on a sticky note or maybe on a device. But I'm going to ask you some key questions, and it's just really to get your thoughts going. First question is, who are the key stakeholders in your organization? Are they managers, end users? Are they clients or are they students? Who are the key stakeholders? Next, how will you define the project milestones? Perhaps these are completions of project phases, right? Or maybe your milestones might be measured by quarterly accomplishments. Perhaps there are reports or surveys. The milestones could just be input from key stakeholders, but you definitely want to identify those. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the deliverables, right? So what deliverables would be included in your project? Deliverables are usually defined within the scope of the project, as most of you know. It could be anything from reports to communications, surveys, data analysis, could be a new technology, could be documentation. Just about anything you can think of within your project could be a deliverable. And it's helpful to identify these early on as you're designing your work breakdown structure. You also want to consider your timeline. Everything takes time. It's good to have a start date and end date so you get that duration, you know how to allocate resources, you look at your budget, then you analyze constraints. And so it's good to have that timeline. Early on, when you first start this project, I would encourage you to set a meeting schedule, determine how often your project team should meet. Now, this could depend on your team, the priority of the project rollout. There's so many competing factors, but definitely have that be one of your first considerations if you're doing this project. Finally, I'd like you to consider a communication strategy that your whole team can agree on. And this is often something that you could pose at your first project meeting, asking folks, what is the preferred communication strategy? And is there a schedule? Is there a certain rhythm or cadence to this communication strategy? Maybe you all agree to send out a project status report every Friday. So this is a fun activity. So I hope you found that valuable just to kind of start thinking about the project planning checklist. Great. In summary, now that you have seen a demonstration of how SharePoint is so easy to use, and that a document library is an effective, innovative solution to organize information, share documents with instructional staff or other team members, save documents and information for your MS Teams channel. SharePoint and MS Teams are a collaboration platform with tools and functions that allow users the opportunity to share resources, including Word documents, Excel files, PDFs, images, videos, and links. Let's wrap up with a quick review of our case study. For the Instructional Technologists Group, the SharePoint Document Library provided an effective and innovative solution for the curation of online resources to not only support the continuity of instruction efforts, but as a long-term collaborative solution with a workplace that is accessible from any device. Well, I know it's a lot to think about. We covered a lot very quickly, but can you begin to see the potential for implementing a SharePoint solution in your organization or work group to support collaboration and sharing? Keep in mind, there are many resources available on Microsoft's website to help you. However, you can also get help from your homepage on the left. You can search for help, or you can click the help icon. It's located in the upper right-hand corner. And now that you've completed our presentation today, you should be able to identify the benefits of implementing a SharePoint and MS Teams project, recognize how a SharePoint document library organizes information, reflect on project management best practices for implementing a collaborative project. I know we only have a few minutes, but I'm very happy to ask you what questions you have about SharePoint and MS Teams as a collaborative technology. And Bill, that's a great question. Is there a difference between creating a Teams site through office.com versus the Teams app? And I know there's some pros on the call, but to the best of my knowledge, it's really basically the same. However, I believe that when you create it through MS Teams, which I think is what you're saying, is that you're just kind of creating a default site. And if you want to customize those metadata fields like in the document library, so that then you really want to go into SharePoint, and you know that in Teams, you have the option, right? It says open in SharePoint. It's on the top toolbar. But when you open it in SharePoint, you can see you could really expand and elaborate, create some site pages, and look at all the apps available to explore in SharePoint to really customize that site. And what was the other question? Phil, are you able to see the chat? I can't see it as clearly. I have a lot going on here. Let's see. Okay, and the question was, oh, and you answered it, Phil, thanks. So is UW placing Box with SharePoint? I don't think so.
Right, and Janine, who works on Box, confirmed, no, it's not going away.
I got it.
Now, a individual group may make a decision to use one of many alternatives for either file storage or collaboration. I think that's what's great about presentations like this, right? I get a good look at this thing because I don't have a team that uses these two together very in depth, and that's why I like this stuff. So
great. I know I've just got another one. Yes, Brenda, there'll be a recording available, and I can send you the PowerPoint. Any other questions? Quick questions?
To unmute and ask a question, or come on video and ask a question, you could do that as well.
So Erin is asking, what is the difference between SharePoint and OneDrive? Don't they do the same thing? I can't speak to OneDrive, but I can say this. SharePoint is really a collaborative solution that's totally integrated with the Office suite. So that if I wanted to create a site, as we did for our continuity of instruction, is, you have site pages, and you can search and you can sort. And thanks, Mary. OneDrive is the storage for documents, but SharePoint is really a collaborative tool that allows you to assign permissions, integrate with Office, integrate with Microsoft Teams and the Teams channel. So great questions. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I think we're out of time. Phil, are we at the hour?
We've got like a minute. Oh,
okay.
Nope, there, just flipped over. All right. So that puts us at 1:45. Yeah, folks, if you had more questions to drop in chat, the usual thing with these presentations, the captioning and recording and slides, we're looking at trying to have those all on the site, itproconf.wisc by next week. That's the goal. We'll see if we get it all that quickly. But Margaret, thank you so much for this presentation. I certainly learned a bunch, and like I said, it's really cool to be able to see like someone who really knows this thing be able to explain, hey, here's some examples. I love that.
Yeah, it's really fun. Great meeting everybody. Thanks for coming.